I want to introduce the Tiger Protocol. And the reason I came up with this protocol is really to address the epidemic of autoimmunity. So, over the past 20 years that I've been practicing, I've developed a specialty in autoimmune disease. It just grew organically in my integrative medicine practice. Just to share where I practice, it's in California, and I'm in a large medical group called Sutter Health, which has locations throughout California. The good thing is we accept insurance. So it's a group that accepts regular insurance, Medicare even. And so patients have access to see us in our 5 different clinics. So there's over the years, I've seen in our clinics that the rates of autoimmune disease have been skyrocketing. And even in children as well as adults. And so now 1 in 5 Americans suffers from some form of autoimmune condition, and there are more than 100 autoimmune diseases and even common conditions like irritable bowel syndrome. They're now understanding an autoimmune mechanism to that. And there's been a 300% increase in some autoimmune diseases over the past 10 years, 500% increase over the past few decades in others. And so it's clear that it's not genetic changes that are driving that because it's way too rapid. So it's environmental. So I started to do research about 10 years ago why this has been going on. And that's how I found out many of these factors that I'm sharing. So the prevalence and cost are greater than heart disease, cancer, and diabetes combined, according to one study. And so just in one slide, the what is the Tiger Protocol? It's a protocol that addresses the root causes of autoimmunity because conventional treatment does not address those causes, although it's very helpful for addressing symptoms and bringing a patient out of a critical zone into a stable zone. But these root causes also drive our modern epidemics of obesity, diabetes, fatty liver, and heart disease. Just an aside about fatty liver. I recently read a paper saying that it's estimated now about 2 billion people worldwide have fatty liver. And many of these are lean patients, not obese, because we used to think that only overweight or obese individuals can get fatty liver. It's only metabolic. That's not true. I think maybe many of you have also seen now a lot of lean patients, even children being diagnosed with fatty liver. So, two of the causes that are unrecognized are number one, dysbiosis. So, imbalance in the microbiome, lack of beneficial bacteria, overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria. That's associated through the gut liver axis with fatty liver. And number two is environmental toxins, which are a big focus of my talk, how to help your patients reduce exposure and also boost their detox capacities, what practices, lifestyle techniques, supplements, dietary changes can all help with detoxification. So TIGER is an acronym. It stands for toxins, infections, gut health, eating right, and rest or managing stress and the mind body connection. So I've tried to capture in those 5 causes the primary drivers of autoimmunity and inflammation. And then this study just shows more of the effects of toxins. So in the autoimmune disease research community, certain toxins are called autogens, the toxins that drive autoimmunity. But many of them are also obesogens, which promote obesity, diabetogens, which promote diabetes, and cardiovascular disruptors as well. So many of these are the endocrine disrupting chemicals or EDCs. So I believe that taking this approach, learning this 5-step protocol will help your patients to not only reduce risk of immune dysregulation, autoimmunity, but also type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease. I think with the diabetes epidemic, it's also well established that environmental toxins are one of the biggest factors that drive insulin resistance, that raise blood sugar. And I feel like that's a little bit underappreciated and not targeted enough when we're working with our patients with diabetes. So I think toxins are really a fundamental issue. So the approach I take, just to give a little bit of where I'm coming from. So my first training in integrative medicine was with Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona. This was back in 2009. And I love his definition of integrative medicine, which is that it's an evidence-based approach that incorporates conventional and alternative methods to facilitate the body's innate healing response. And that really emphasizes that the body does have this self-healing capacity, innate ability to heal itself, if we can give it the right inputs, if we can give it the right dietary, lifestyle, sleep inputs, and targeted supplementation and botanicals. All of that can really stimulate that self-healing response, which I think is fundamental. That's what we do in integrative medicine. And I also incorporate functional medicine. That's another passion of mine, which can be defined as a holistic approach that seeks to identify and address the root cause of disease by correcting imbalances in the function of different organ systems. So I do a lot of functional testing of the microbiome, environmental toxins. I'm going to be presenting a case in a few minutes talking about some of the functional tests I've done, and so you'll learn my approach to a specific autoimmune patient. And one of the key principles of functional medicine, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, is that one condition has many causes. So depression, for example, autoimmune disease is no exception. But one cause can also contribute to many conditions. And these are things like chronic inflammation, high toxic burden, chronic stress, occult infection, dietary factors. So all these things affect many conditions as well. So that's one of the key principles of functional medicine that I incorporate in my protocol. So let's dive in, and I'm going to present this case. Connie was a 51-year-old woman with rheumatoid arthritis that I saw in my practice. She had successfully raised 4 children. She was a Haitian American stay-at-home mom. But then when her youngest daughter started high school, she began to have symptoms of joint pain, stiffness, swelling. It was like she was just pushing herself to raise her children. And then when the last child was out of the house, it was like the other shoe dropped and she started to get all these symptoms. And then soon after was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. She was prescribed methotrexate and Xeljanz by her rheumatologist, standard medications. But she didn't really feel better. She wasn't finding relief. She was still struggling with a lot of the same symptoms. And then she began to be concerned about the potential long-term side effects of these medications and then sought out integrative medicine to see what she could do. So always start with a detailed history. And I found out that she had many mercury-containing dental amalgams from her childhood in Haiti. And for heavy metal testing, so blood testing, like lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, tells you about pretty recent exposure in terms of just the past 2 to 3 months. But if you do either urine testing or hair testing, you get a longer perspective on body burden. So in her case, I did both blood testing. I find Quicksilver Laboratory is a better functional laboratory for assessing mercury and lead in the blood, for example, compared to a standard national labs that we use also. But for heavy metal blood testing, I like Quicksilver Laboratory. And then I did a urine test for heavy metals as well, which was a provoked test from the Doctors Data Company. And urine testing for heavy metals is controversial. There are some limitations and caveats, which I'll talk about. One of them is that there is no standard reference range for the provoked test versus a non-provoked test. So I use DMSA. So DMSA is a chelator. It's typically we get it made in a compounding pharmacy. I use 2 capsules of 500 milligrams each, so 1,000 milligrams for the average weight adult. And then I have them take that DMSA first thing in the morning and then collect their urine over 6 hours and then send in a small sample from that to Doctors Data. This is the methodology for collecting that. And then that is a provoked sample. So if a patient is really highly motivated, you can do both an unprovoked, just a regular baseline urine collection, and then the next day a provoked sample and collect both and then compare them. Or you can also just do the provoked, which is what I typically do. And the key thing is the reference range is for a non-provoked test. So what I use as a cutoff is if the levels are 4 to 5 times the upper limit of normal for the heavy metals. So for example, if lead has a level of 2 for a non-provoked urine sample, then if it's above 10, you can be confident that, okay, we're dealing with something real. This is a defensible finding that we can definitely treat. If for example, mercury normal is below 4, if it's above that 16 to 20 range, then you know that is significant. So in her case, both the mercury and lead were above 5 times the upper limit of normal for each. So I concluded that was on the urine testing, and blood testing as well was above the reference range. So I concluded the mercury amalgams were important. And then lead, unfortunately, many types of chocolate contain lead just in the cacao, the way that the cacao bean is cultivated in certain countries around the world. The soils have lead and the cacao plant tends to accumulate lead. There are brands of chocolate that are lower and have been tested that we can talk about if people are interested. But so Connie was very motivated to address these root causes of the rheumatoid arthritis symptoms. So the elevated mercury and the elevated lead. So this is one thing that is shown in the literature. Case reports have shown how autoimmune patients doing heavy metal detoxification or chelation get significant remission, improvement of symptoms, and it's clear. And that was also the case with Connie. So to address the heavy metal issues, I referred her to a biological dentist who carefully and gradually worked with her to replace all of those mercury containing dental amalgams and replace them with composite metals. So when that was completed after about 6 months, I had her do a heavy metal detox protocol for about 4 months using herbal supplements, including chlorella, cilantro, and modified citrus pectin. So those three are found in a product called Pure and Complex or Heavy Metal Complex from Pure and Cap. I find that to be a pretty good blend. It's got multiple botanicals, usually well tolerated. And I recommend patients build up to 2 capsules twice a day. It should be on an empty stomach away from food so that the citrus pectin isn't binding the nutrients in meals, so at least in an hour or two apart from meals, 4 capsules a day. And then whenever I'm doing any type of heavy metal detox, I like to add a liver support. Use Pure Encapsulation's Liver GI Detox, which has milk thistle and NAC and other supplements that help supporting the liver because of the increased load on the liver when your body's really detoxifying heavy metals. Also, I'm a big fan of the sauna. So Connie used a portable home sauna that I recommended for her. Sauna is a proven way to excrete as well heavy metals through the sweat. And then the benefit is you're excreting a lot of other toxins as well through the sweat, like other endocrine disrupting chemicals, environmental pollutants, BPA, phthalates, a number of toxins. So you get additional benefit and you get the reduction in risk of heart disease, reduction of inflammation. So she did I advise her to eliminate chocolate for some time and switch to having carob. So carob bean is a similar tasting substitute that's free of heavy metals. And then in her case, I didn't put this in the slide, but psyllium husk was another source of lead, unfortunately. So we went through her diet, supplements, and identified, for example, the chocolate. And also, I had her switch to, there's a couple of brands that have been tested to be low. These are psyllium husk brands that are very low in lead. So I had her switch to, I think it was Organic India, one of the brands that has been independently tested by a third party to be low in lead. So she did all those things in terms of detoxification. And then we repeated her heavy metal testing, quicksilver, as well as the doctor's data provoked test. And the mercury and lead levels had normalized. So they were down into the normal range. And then, so that's always the first step because I feel toxins are really such a primary creator of inflammation and very big disruptors of the immune system. So I always start with the detox. That's why the T in Tiger protocol is first. And then that give us some room to start the other modifications, working on lifestyle, sleep. And then I'm very big on outdoor time and physical activity, and ideally combining them. And the reasons for that, this is now the lifestyle elements, which I focus a lot on, is that there is very good research that getting outdoors to get sunlight is very beneficial for not only vitamin D production, but directly beneficial for your immune system. Because sunlight directly activates your immune cells and has been proven to speed up the movement of T cells, other immune cells. So sunlight is a direct stimulant in a good way to the immune system. Many of our autoimmune patients, it's a complex immune situation because part of their immune system is underactive, which is why autoimmune patients are more prone to chronic infections. But then part of their immune system is overactive as well, and that's the autoimmunity. So getting the vitamin D, either through supplementation or sunlight, helps modulate the immune system. And then sunlight has a beneficial activating component on the immune cells directly, and it helps the circadian rhythm, helps with sleep. And she had a park near her house, so I had her go jogging for 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes in the park 4 or 5 times a week. So it's also been proven this being in nature, especially green spaces, that lowers inflammation, lowers cortisol, stress hormones, especially. So that's a very powerful combination, combining outdoor time with physical activity. Even if it's a cloudy day, that's okay because the sunlight, the visible spectrum, as well as the infrared components will come through. Those will penetrate clothing. And then being in these green spaces, forest bathing, that will reflect a lot more of the beneficial infrared light. And exposure to green spaces has been shown to really help with the inflammation. So she began doing all of these things as part of the Tiger protocol: outdoor time, sunlight exposure, physical activity, working on sleep. And then over some months, she started to finally see her symptoms improving. Her pain from the rheumatoid arthritis and some of the inflammation and swelling was beginning to reduce, and her energy levels improved. And then after a few more months, she was able to discontinue Xeljanz, so the second medication that her rheumatologist prescribed for her. And she continued on methotrexate and was in remission, free of symptoms. So, of course, it's not really possible in most cases to cure autoimmune disease, but you can help your patients achieve remission, which is when symptoms are quiescent, they have a normal quality of life, and they're on the minimum dosage of medications. So I do consider that a win if we can get a patient down from 2 medications to 1 medication, and most importantly, into remission, because even with the 2 medications before the protocol, she was having symptoms. She was not happy, not having a good quality of life, in pain every day, of course. But eventually, after we worked on the detox and all these elements, the gut health, her sleep, the physical activity, then she achieved remission, and she's been continuing to do just on methotrexate. So I hope that that gives you an idea about how I approach a patient. So I want to go over in the last couple of slides what you can expect to learn from the 6-week, the full boot camp. And then I'm happy to take questions. So just think about what questions you would like to ask today. But what you can expect from the 6-week is a comprehensive understanding through the boot camp of the entire Tiger protocol and how to treat autoimmunity, chronic diseases. We focus a lot on chronic inflammation, which is at the root of all of our modern chronic epidemics. And then really focus on in-depth knowledge of the microbiome and gut immune axis. And I really take a food as medicine approach, so extensive focus on diet. We know that the diversity of the microbiome is one of the key metrics for health, key metrics for longevity as well, because centenarians have increased diversity of the microbiome compared to others. And so longevity is also a consequence of creating the ideal microbiome. We'll talk about how I assess dysbiosis, how I treat that. And one of the tests I use is called a stool pH test. This is a standard lab test available at any standard lab like Quest or LabCorp or your local university lab. But the way you interpret it is actually can tell you a lot about the microbiome. And I also talk about the functional medicine tests like shotgun metagenomic stool sequencing, looking at PCR testing, the GI map stool test. So I go through all the functional medicine testing as well. But then for those patients who don't have access to that, we can do a stool pH test through the standard lab, get a lot of information. I talk a lot about diet, my approach, which is an evolutionary perspective, more of a paleo diet, but plant-based. So we can get all those plant foods to boost the nutrient density and also boost the diversity of the microbiome. And then the mind-body immune connection, and then case studies. So I do have in the recorded content 12 cases, just like the one I presented today, where I walk through my entire approach. And then during all the live sessions, happy to go into more detail on difficult cases you guys might have, or other questions about how to approach these complex patients that all of us see, because autoimmune disease is complex and it's difficult to treat. And then everyone who signs up for the bootcamp will get a copy of my book, The Tiger Protocol, which has 800 references and also like a bunch of 40 recipes. But with the references, I always encourage people to go to the primary source literature, read some of these studies. There's so much out there now on autoimmunity, which is why I put them all together in the book. But then a common question I also have received is what is not in the book, but in the boot camp, because it's 2 different things. The book, which you will all receive, is really tailored to the general public, tailored to patients, whereas my focus in the boot camp is really tailored to healthcare practitioners, much more clinical. Like I hope the case I presented today will illustrate that clinical approach. And then the book also does not have the details of these cases in terms of functional medicine testing, test results, supplement protocol. I've also mentioned brands that I like and dosing supplements. I don't have any commercial affiliation with any brands, so I'm confident in recommending products that I think are good. We can talk about specific brands. And then in the bootcamp, I've also included some new content about the microbiome with a presentation that covers nearly 100 gut supportive foods that are not mentioned in the book. Just there's so much that I wanted to put in there and just lack of space, even though the book is 400 pages long. So there's a lot more about the food as medicine approach for the microbiome and for boosting diversity. And there's a deeper dive into the gut immune axis in one of the presentations, which has new content, new references, and new slides. And then I also include a bit more about my evolutionary perspective on diet and eating, distinct from the nutrition content in the book. This comes from my first book, which was really more about paleo eating and evolutionary perspective, as well as Ayurveda, which is a traditional medicine from India. But the bootcamp includes some of that evolutionary perspective as to why I recommend the diet that I do, because for millions of years, we evolved as hunter-gatherers and mostly eating leaves and tubers and starchy vegetables and roots and berries, and then occasionally hunting and fishing. So I go a lot more into the evolutionary perspective, which I think is important to understand for helping counsel your patients. This bootcamp includes some new content about the mind-body connection that I was not able to put in the book. And this content explores how beliefs cause changes in the body, how beliefs change physiology. And it covers specifically how beliefs about diet change metabolic hormones, change ghrelin, change how the body processes food. Beliefs about exercise change how even things like blood pressure, metabolism can be modified without a change in actual activity, just changing a person's belief about how much they're exercising. How beliefs about sleep change a person's daytime symptoms and drowsiness independently of how they actually slept. Beliefs about stress. So whether a person emphasizes a belief about stress being debilitating and harmful, or if they're emphasizing more of the positive aspects of stress, how stress can be enhancing, can boost creativity, how that actually changes their body's HPA axis, their cortisol awakening response. So beliefs about stress change a person's response under stress. And that's something vitally important that you can share with your patients. Also, a study showed that beliefs about aging, your mindset about aging, positive or negative, can lead to a difference of up to 7.6 years in lifespan. So that was a very fascinating study. So just to say that beliefs change physiology in all of these areas. And this is also some new content that's not in the book, but I'm very excited to include that in the bootcamp. And finally, the tips and tools, techniques for treating the most challenging and complex autoimmune patients. So that's what is included in the book and also in the bootcamp that is not in the book. So I hope that answered a question, which I think many of you might have.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.